Okay, so now I want to talk about your derailleurs. So this is something, even if I have it set up perfectly here in Utah, it'll get to you, you'll ride it for, a week or two, and it will start to not work as well as you were hoping, but it's pretty simple. And I think maybe we talked about this earlier, but on your other bike, this derailleur works all on cable tension. You can see the cable down here, comes through the housing, yada yada, goes up to your shifter over on your right hand. So that shifter, all it does is tighten and loosen this cable by pulling it this way or letting go of it and allowing it to sling back, and then the spring in this derailleur pulls that derailleur out. So if you tighten this cable or pull on this cable, it pulls the derailleur in towards the wheel, towards one of the larger cogs, which is a smaller gear. When the cable loosens, then the springs inside the derailleur pull the derailleur out towards the outside of the bike and into one of these smaller cogs, which is a higher gear. So it's pretty hard to show you while pedaling. In fact, it's going to be impossible, I am thinking, so I won't try and do that. But you do have some adjustment back here. So if you're ever riding along and you see this little black, it's a little knob. It's kind of hard to tell maybe here that it rotates, but it does. So suppose you're riding along, you figured out how to shift, and so you try and shift yourself from where the chain is now into one of these higher gears, and it just won't go. Maybe it starts to kind of clatter, or it shifts. You shift it once, but it doesn't move. What that means is the cable is not tight enough to pull it from this gear into the next gear up. This is totally counterintuitive, but when the cable isn't tight enough, then what you need to do is turn this counterclockwise. And you see the two little pieces, the silver piece here and then the black piece. When you turn it counterclockwise, you're actually unthreading the silver piece from the derailleur, and that effectively lengthens the cable housing and tightens the cable and pulls it further towards the inside. And then the opposite, if you shift and it won't go into these smaller cogs, that means the cable's too tight. When the cable's too tight, you need to take this, turn it clockwise, as you're looking at it. It will thread this silver piece down into the derailleur and effectively change the length of this housing and loosen the cable. So that's one of those things that you can explain it until you play with it a little bit. It doesn't make tons of sense, but it's fairly self-explanatory. You have 3 screws on this, 1, 2, and 3. I will say for now, don't ever mess with those screws. And again, I think we explained this when you're looking at Amy's bike. People always come back here when it doesn't shift and they start screwing around with these, no pun intended, and they mess their shifting all up. Shifting is all about this thing. So we'll leave it at that. So when you shift, and I'm going to set the camera down here, see if we can get a decent angle. We'll find something to put underneath it, like so. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pedal, try and stay out of the camera's way, and I want you to listen to the clicks as it shifts. I'll shut up for a second. So you can hear each click is a shift. And so when you're out riding, that's what you should expect. If you ever click it and it doesn't shift, that's when you want to start thinking about which way am I trying to shift and what adjustment needs to be made. So that's kind of a way to get a feel for what's happening. It's obviously easier for me with the stand because I can do all of this without being on the bike. But if you find yourself a little cul-de-sac or something and ride around in circles, you'll probably get it. The front derailleur is much the same concept. You have 2 screws. These are called the limit screws, just like you have on the rear derailleur. You basically want to leave these alone because I've set these, they should be about right. All they do is they are sort of like bookends. They affect the outside and they affect the inside, but they don't affect anything in between. So when you shift, again, I'll set this down, and this time I'm going to try and, well, see if I can aim it at the crankset itself and see if that helps you. You can kind of watch the derailleur move as it shifts from gear to gear. So it's in the little ring right now. So I'm on your left hand. When I push the big lever, it pushes it towards the outside. Now when I click the small lever, it pops it back in towards the inside. So this is something, after time, the cable will stretch a little bit. You know, you'll push towards the outside and you'll get sort of this scenario where the chain thinks about it, finally goes, and then maybe even ends up doing this in the end. If it won't shift that into there, that's an indication you need to tighten the cable, because that derailleur, the cable's pulling the derailleur to the outside. So this adjustment is more difficult because you don't have an adjustment screw. So if you ever want to adjust this, we'll get back to the right thing. You have your cable here. You probably guessed by now that's a 5mm Allen wrench you need. To tighten the cable, you would loosen this Allen wrench and pull slightly on this cable. You won't be able to pull it much. All you're really doing is putting a little more tension on it. So don't expect to get an inch out of it. You're talking a millimeter or 2. So it's kind of a difficult adjustment because it's very fine. There just isn't really in this system a different way to do it. They do make pieces you can put onto the bike that give you some adjustment, but this one doesn't have any currently. So those are your derailleurs, and probably cause more frustration for riding than any other piece of the componentry that you may look at. So we'll call that the end of this video.